All right, Mr. Chairman, you are live.
Well, good afternoon, Corporations Committee. Welcome to another exciting day. We have 3 bills before us. And before we start the meeting, just a friendly reminder, if anyone has anything in the interim where you know you will not be able to attend the meeting, previously booked vacation, something that is just immovable, please let me know. All the interim committees are scheduling meetings. So if you have any thoughts of where you'd like to visit in the interim and any dates you certainly cannot make an interim meeting, let me know at your earliest convenience because the calendar is filling up fast. With that, Barb, if you would call the roll.
Representative Blackburn. Representative Clausen. Representative Clifford. Representative Duncan. Vice Chair Ayer.
Here.
Representative Hunt. Representative McGuire. Representative Roscoe. Chairman Zwanitzer.
And so committee, we are going to take bills out of order today. We're going to hear Senate File 102 first, primarily because my co-chairman of the Senate and the majority floor leader asked nicely. So committee, please turn to the blue copy of 102 in your packet, unclaimed cooperative utility deposits and payments. And Senator Driscoll, welcome to Corporations in the House. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, esteemed members of the committee, first, thank you very much for accommodating me, letting me go ahead of time. I've sat through physician's assistants already. It's enthralling, but not what I need to do twice. So Senator Baldwin will take good care of you. I bring you Senate File 102, unclaimed cooperative utility deposits and payments. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is actually a pretty simple bill, and I'll tell you kind of what it does and walk you through just a little bit. What we have is a lot of our co-ops up in our country, well, all across the state, but in particular up in our area, ended up with pretty big bankruptcies. We all know what happened out of the coal bed methane deal, and they ended up with pretty big stranded deposits, and they actually took some pretty big hits in the companies from the bankruptcies as well. And what we're asking in this bill is that they be allowed to have those deposits, which would end up in unclaimed property, and after a period of time to have them returned back to the co-op to be used for the good of the co-op. So it's not a profit for a company. It is to go back and be for the members. They're all member-owned nonprofits, and to be for the good of the co-op, which I happen to be a member. Full disclosure, I can tell you firsthand, our local one is Powder River Energy. They took some massive hits through bankruptcy through that, and they'd like to get back the deposits, and some of them are very significant. So as we go through that, that's really what this does. Go to page 1 at the bottom. We go back into the statutes on line 14 and 15, and notwithstanding statutes 34, 24, 109, and any other provisional law, any deposit or advance payment that's been refunded, including interest thereupon, and has not been claimed by the member appearing on the records as cooperative more than 2 years, to be determined to be unclaimed, which is the same as the state property does. And notwithstanding any other provision of law, including provisions pertaining to unclaimed property, unclaimed refunds for deposit or advance payments shall be used by the cooperative utility for the benefit of the general membership of the cooperative. The right of an owner to the unclaimed refunds for the deposits or advance payments held by a cooperative utility is extinguished when the unclaimed refunds are used by the cooperative utility for the benefit of its general membership in accordance with this subsection. Nothing in this subsection precludes a cooperative utility from refunding subsequently claimed funds at the cooperative utility's discretion. Really what that says is if it's my grandmother or one of the locals, I'm going to assure you those board members are our friends and neighbors. They're going to refund it back. If it's a bankrupt company and somebody's doing, they're probably not if they spent the money. So then we drop down to line 17, deposits held by utilities. We added in subject to subsection B, what we're coming to, goes through the deposits, and then subsection B on page 3. You go to line 5, says provision of this act shall not apply to deposits or advance payments made to a cooperative utility, subject to the provisions of Wyoming Cooperative Utilities Act. They've got some pretty extensive things they have to do. So just says they're going to fall under those rules. That's the long and short of it. It's really for those us, and I think I look out through this deal, we've got numbers of you either in areas that have major co-op utilities. I think we all understand they're us. And we just as soon our money went back into our local utility to do good for our neighbors and our friends than to sit in unclaimed property in eternity. And that's what a big part of these will. With that, I'd stand for questions.
Questions for Senator Driscoll? Not seeing it at this time. Thank you very much. Don't go too far.
Thank you very much for accommodating.
Mr. Taylor, I'm just guessing, I don't have any state agency people here on the bill, so you're probably next in the hierarchy. Floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Sean Taylor, Executive Director of the Wyoming Rural Electric Association. I sent you all an email last night with some supporting points, so I don't want to belabor that. I will just say that in many instances, these deposits or refunds aren't that large. And we had our co-ops, as we were drafting this bill, say we would still like to be able to refund that money even if we use it, because it's not, for the most part, very large sums of money. And so that's why we had that amendment in the Senate. So even if the co-ops use it for the betterment of the members, and a member, as Senator Driscoll said, comes back and says, I'd like my refund, more than likely, if it's not a huge dollar amount, it'll be refunded. But as he also mentioned, and I have Mike Easley, the general manager of Powder Energy, on the Zoom today, and he can kind of go into a little bit more background and reason why we brought this bill to you all. But for some of those larger deposits, not only they could potentially be sent to a different state, depending on where the company that goes bankrupt or gave the initial deposit. So that money would go back to the state of record where the company was headquartered. So it wouldn't even stay in Wyoming. And so we also thought, well, why not keep it here, and why not keep it with our local co-op? So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
How about let's bring in Mr. Easley, and then we can ask questions at the same time, if that works. Mr. Easley, welcome to Corporations. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Mike Easley, the CEO of Powder Energy Corporation, and I'd like to speak in support of the bill currently in front of the committee here. I think Senator Driscoll and Sean did a good job of kind of giving the high points of it, but I'd like to maybe bring it down to maybe some specific examples here at Powder River. So during the coal bed methane boom, we had customers that through the process set aside dollars as deposits against retirement costs of line when it's time to take the line out, and then also money to hold against the risk of stranded investment. And we are getting close to starting to unwind a lot of that infrastructure. And so some of these dollars that we are carrying are fairly significant, much more than we've seen in the past. Typically, we would have like $4,000 or $5,000 a year that would be in these unclaimed deposits that we have. When we talk about deposits, just want to make sure that we have the security deposit that covers the power bill. And then we have these other deposits that have covered these other expenses like stranded investment or retirement costs. So what I'm talking about here is not the security deposit, because typically when a company or an account gets into trouble, that security deposit that we have goes right against to pay the power bill. So this is beyond the security deposit. But these funds, typically we'd have $3,000 to $4,000 a year. We've had some years where we have sent like $20,000 down to the state of Texas for companies that left Wyoming, and we didn't even know we had a Texas address was the last address we had, and they never collected the money, and that was sent down to Texas to the unclaimed property there. So we're trying to do what we can to try to keep the money that we know we'll be unable to return some of it. We don't know how many of these members will be able to find with the dollars. A lot of companies have changed and gone bankrupt and just gone out of business. Typically, like our more traditional companies, like our coal mine companies, and even a lot of our well-established oil and gas companies, they all have done a really good job of providing us, addresses and things like that to get the capital credit refunds that we typically do. So this is really, I think, from our perspective, is going to focus more on the companies that, kind of came and went. And we just don't know where they are, who they are anymore. So we hope to be able to treat these dollars just like we do capital credits. And for 75 years, we've been going through the process of retiring patronage capital back to our membership. This is a little different than patronage capital because it's not collected, vis-a-vis a power bill. But that being said, the idea of being able to take these dollars and use them to the benefit of our members, much like we do the capital credits, whether it's scholarships or a donation to Powder River Energy's foundation, those kind of things are opportunities that we would like to be able to have with the dollars that are addressed under under the bill before the committee. I'm happy to take any questions that folks may have.
So Mr. Easley, I just want to make sure I heard you right. These unclaimed deposits, they're not necessarily going back to decrease the current ratepayers. The cooperative utility gets to use them for the general benefit of the general membership of the cooperative. So the cooperative board basically gets to decide what to do with that. It's not automatically to bring rates down. You could put it into some type of promotion or scholarship fund or any number of other things under this law.
Yeah, so the state law says that those funds would be used to the general benefit of the cooperative. And so traditionally how that's manifested pretty much across the state is those funds have been taken and used to pay for scholarships, which, across our service territory, we go to all the schools and do that. We also have a pretty big spend out of this account for 4-H beef, that when we go and we use these funds to buy the 4-H beef at all our county fairs. And those are dollars that if we were using, general funds to do that, it would have a impact on the rates. But by using these unclaimed capital credit dollars, we're able to do that without having any rate impact for those types of activities.
Okay, questions for either Mr. Easley or Mr. Taylor? Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Easley, do you know approximately how much you have in unclaimed deposits for Wyoming? Is that possible?
Yeah, so I can give you, I don't know how, they're not unclaimed yet because we have not started to provide, to send the money back. We are just getting ready to do that within the next year or two. We have about $7.5 million that we collected to guard against the risk of stranded investment. And what that means is that if the company invested the money to build a substation and the load did not manifest as we planned, we would have made that investment and nobody to collect it from. And so as we depreciated these substations over several years and depreciated its infrastructure, we're now to the point where what we're carrying on the books for that value of that asset is now about equal to how much money we have to guard against the risk of stranded investment. And then as we continue to pay depreciation on that, we will actually have money that we can then return out of that fund, which we would have more money than we need to manage that risk of stranded investment. And so we, probably within the next year or so, we could be returning or trying to find about $1.5 million to return to various customers, members that were in the coal bed methane industry back that have been in like 2000 and the big heyday was probably like 2005, 2010 timeframe. So about 10 years ago. That's what we currently have. We also have set aside a bunch of money for retiring of all the old power lines. And that dollar amount is $18 million that we've set aside. We have not begun to take the power lines out in any type of a really robust program yet. And it's hard. I think we pretty much on that one, we're going to probably not have any money left or be very little money left once we get all those power lines taken out. But over the next decade, we'll take out power lines and we'll use the money in that account to pay for it. When it's all said and done, in several years, whatever money is left, then we would try to return to the members that contributed those deposits, and those that we couldn't locate, then we would want to, that money would then be subject to this particular bill if it was approved.
Okay. Further questions for either Mr. Taylor or Mr. Easley? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Mike, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Robertson, while you're in the room, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Zwanitzer and fellow chair committee members. My name is Jeff Robertson. I'm the administrator of unclaimed property for the state of Wyoming. I'm with the state treasurer's office, and just basically here to answer any questions if you have anything. I'm sure the committee knows unclaimed property. Our job is to return money and other types of properties, whether it be safe deposit boxes, security, so forth, to the rightful owners. Every state has an unclaimed property division, and it's a central location for people to come and find the money that is rightfully theirs. Our only concern with this is we believe this may be providing a slippery slope down the road where, if we're creating an exception for one group, in this case, where does it go to the next time when another group or entity or a nonprofit comes to you and asks for the same thing? So that's really our only concern. And like I said, I'm just here to provide any answers if you have any specific questions.
Questions for Mr. Robertson? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Jeff. Anyone else here to testify on Senate File 102? No one else online on Senate File 102, you unclaimed cooperative utility deposits. Seeing none, we will close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Hunt, seconded by Duncan. Discussion or amendments, committee. I know Representative Ayer, you did have a question earlier. I didn't let you ask.
I did, got it.
Okay. Any discussion from the committee on the bill? Seeing none and question being called. Barb, if you'd call the roll on Senate File 102.
Representative Blackburn.
Aye.
Representative Clausen.
Aye.
Representative Clifford. Representative Duncan. Vice Chair Ayer.
Aye.
Representative Hunt.
Aye.
Representative McGuire. Representative Roscoe.
Aye.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Aye.
All ayes.
Yeah, and then I'm under the understanding, Representative Ayer, you're carrying this on the floor? You could or you will. All right. You're very welcome, Mr. Co-Chairman. Enjoy your lunch hour. Welcome to the newest Chairman of Labor and Health in decades in the Senate. Senator Baldwin, you're here to present Senate File 33 Physician Assistant Amendments. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee, for hearing this bill. I see familiar faces. As you can tell by what I'm wearing, my roots are in the House. And the chairman forgot, but that's okay. He's getting old. I bring to you Senate File 33, the Physician Assistants Amendments. And I would point out to you first that if you read the vote call from the Senate, I did declare a conflict on this. But by way of information, I am a physician assistant. Although I don't think I stand to gain much on financially from this, as I'm in semi-retirement and plan on retiring, not as soon as I want to retire, but soon. This bill comes to you from, actually, at the end of last session, the Wyoming Association of Physician Assistants approached me. And of course, I'm aware of some of these things that are going on about the modernization of the current Physician Assistant Practice Acts across the United States, in this case, in Wyoming. Physician assistants originated a little over 50 years ago. They came from Navy corpsmen who came back from war with significant amount of skills. They were doing things that even physicians and physician assistants today don't do, or do very little, because they were taking care of wounded in war. They had significant skill set. They've been doing a tremendous job, and they came back to the United States and they had nowhere to use those skills. There wasn't a position. There was no, they weren't a nurse. They weren't a physician. They weren't a paramedic. They had nowhere to practice. And that's the origins of the physician assistant profession. As a group of doctors got together and said, hey, I think I know where we can use these guys. They created a physician assistant, and that grew from out on the East Coast. It grew to several programs here in the West and in the Midwest. And one of the programs actually where I went to school, they were originally called the MEDEX programs. University of Utah was a part of that, and that's where my schooling was. And as you can imagine, schooling and education of all medical professions, and nobody's excluded. That's from optometrists to PAs to doctors to DOs to nurses. The education has changed through the years. Things have advanced, skills advance, technology advances. And you know, I don't want to show my age, but I can remember a time, and it was a long time ago, when only doctors started IVs or did EKGs. And that's a skill now done in the field by EMTs and out in the field paramedics. So things have changed dramatically, and they continue to change. The PA profession has changed a lot. There's new skills, there's new subsets, there's new specialties, and the laws and the statutes haven't kept up with that. And this is the goal of this bill, is to modernize that and to bring it into modern times. Now, a number of states across the United States are doing similar legislation. As a matter of fact, the state to the west of us just passed legislation 2 weeks ago. Similar to this, a little bit different, but with a similar goal in mind that passed through their legislature. A number of other states as well have passed that. Just a few highlights, and then there's a number of people who want to testify, so I don't want to bore you with my thoughts, but because they're much smarter and younger than me. PAs, of course, are part of a team, and I think that gets lost a lot in today's society. PAs are not, you know, they're not out there on their own. They're a part of a team, as much of the healthcare team. It's a huge team, and that's how we have better patient care today than we've ever had. You may have as many as 20 or 30 people consulting on a patient. And this bill does not seek to take away that team representation. It doesn't intend to change the scope of practice of a physician assistant. It simply means to change the licensure recommendations so we can make it easier for physician assistants to practice and not have so much bureaucracy and so much red tape to get through, which in consequence will make them more available in rural Wyoming, especially, but across the state of Wyoming, make it an easier effort for them to get employment and be available for the patients in Wyoming. As a part of a team, they have a number of skills. They do a number of things. And school PAs have classroom training, of course, as do all medical professions. In addition, they do rotations in the field. And I can only relate to my schooling. These other folks can give you a little bit more information. I did rotations in OB. I did rotations in the emergency room. I did rotations in surgery. And that's all hands-on patient care out in the field. And it's not in one place. I worked in Nevada. I worked in Wyoming. I worked several places. My school now sends people to Guam. They've got people all over the world picking up skills in addition to the classroom. Once you've completed that now master's level program, you have to take examinations. Those examinations are stringent. They're not easy. They're hard, and they test the skills and the knowledge of a physician assistant. And I think that's across the board too, in all medical healthcare. I think honestly, I think nursing is tougher. I think everybody, including optometrists, which you guys have heard a lot about already on your floor. Yeah, don't. You've heard lots about that. You'll hear more. But the point is that they're highly educated, highly motivated medical professionals, and they're part of a healthcare team. And I think it's become more and more important through the years. And I think with their training, they have a unique niche within the team. They can do some things that other members of the team have a harder time doing. And I think this bill will also free up the doctors with some of their burdensome, their paperwork and some of those things that now they have to do. We can free up the doctors and the DOs out there to do their work and more of what they need to do. So with that said, I don't want to go too deep into this because I think there's these other people that are here are going to give you a lot more information. You'll have questions about education and things like that. And I think that I can certainly answer some of those questions if you got them too. But I was going to note, Mr. Chairman, I believe we have a doctor online who's got some time constraints. I don't know if he's there now, but if we can get him to testify fairly quickly here. So Dr. Haverly.
Okay. Any questions for Senator Baldwin? Not seeing any. I'd certainly be happy to bring Dr. Haverly. Oh, question for Senator Baldwin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Baldwin, would it be fair? I have a very favorite PA in my own hometown. And I go almost exclusively to him. But having said that, is it fair to say why someone would go that direction versus the MD direction? And is it like less liability, maybe? malpractice kind of liability. Can you just clarify that one little piece for me?
Senator Baldwin.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Representative Duncan, liability is not any less. Our liability insurance is quite high, and we do each get that independently. It's just simply a matter of role, what somebody chose. I chose mine because it happened to be the niche. I sensed that physician assistants could spend more time with patients. We didn't have so much time contributed to other things, and I could actually sit down with the patient for a half hour, or an hour if needed, or whatever I needed. In my experience with a lot of the physicians, they were overworked, they were stressed, and they were reluctant to spend that kind of time, especially a lot of physicians, the models have shifted in that we're not independent practice anymore. You know, all doctors used to be out in their own office in the community. And that subtle shift, they've moved into the hospitals. And there's a number of reasons for that. I believe that a member of the Board of Medicine here can kind of shed a little bit more light on that, but that's the shift in society. And I think that with that shift, the hospitals and the places where all the medical providers are located have higher demands on the healthcare providers. And I can give you a couple of examples. They say you will see X number of patients every day. You will work X number of hours every day. And it's a huge demand. And my experience was that the physician assistants and the nurse practitioners, for that matter, could spend more time with the patients and give a little bit better quality care. I don't know if that's your experience, but I would go into the doctor and they were in a hurry to get me out. Matter of fact, when I was young, if I told my mom I had a sore throat, she took me to the doctor. The doctor says, "Oh, give him a shot of penicillin and get him out of here." So I quit telling my mom I had a sore throat. But that, I don't know if that answered your question or not, Representative.
Okay. Dr. Haberly, if you're in the room, please hit on that camera and microphone, and you're welcome to join us for discussion on Senate File 33. And maybe he stepped away from his computer for a second, Senator Baldwin.
He may have.
So let me
Let's
check.
just, while we look, let's just walk you through the bill real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
And it's really quite simple. And I've got two different things in front of me here. I've got the old bill and I've got the engrossed copy as well. And I will try not to get confused, more confused. If you look on the initial page, there are no changes on the initial. One of the big changes as you get into this, as you get on where we go to little a in section 1, after all the repealers, you'll notice it talks about practicing medicine. And in C, it says attaches the title of MD, DO, PA, physician, surgeon, et cetera, et cetera. PA is added. That's something that's added. Physician assistant is added. I will tell you that when I first began practice, which is a number of years ago, on my medical license from the State Board of Medicine, it said Fred Baldwin, PA, is licensed to, and they crossed off practice, or they crossed off medicine. I was licensed to practice, but they would cross off medicine because the statute didn't say we could practice medicine. They said we could practice. That's a change that you'll notice as we go through here in a couple on that first page in 33-26-501 under definitions in little double I, you'll see it says license to practice and medicine is added onto it. That's something new. And then a lot of the next several pages are just removing that supervision or that cosign. Not necessarily supervision. That's a point I should bring out is supervision will still be dependent on the local level. If a hospital says they want you to work with a specific doctor or with, another PA or whatever, that's still allowed under here. And that probably won't change. And the fact is that every PA I know, including myself, I work every day when I'm not in the legislature, with a doctor down the hall or the doctor down the street or the doctor the next state over. I make phone calls. There's some of my PA colleagues that might know more about cardiology than I know. And that's not going to change. That will always be the same, is that we always have collaboration between ourselves and all of the other medical practitioners. And that's an important feature of medicine. As you move into 33-26-502, talks about scope, talks specifically about the education program. And then if you look under little b, rather than assist in the practice of medicine, it's an individual who practices medicine. And a physician assistant is qualified by the individual's education, training, and experience. And mostly what's taken out on that page, all the way through section B, is just that under the supervision of a licensed physician, because physician assistants are highly trained. And we took that out, and that's part of modernization. And then if you look at the final part of that, it talks about collaborating with or referring to the appropriate member of a healthcare team as indicated by the condition of the patient and the education, experience, and competence of a physician assistant and current standard of care. And the degree of collaboration will be determined at the practice level. And that's what I was talking about, the hospital, clinic, et cetera. And then if you move into section little number E, again, we're just removing some of that language and correcting that to meet the new and the more modern classification of a physician assistant. We're removing the physician language. In 33-26-503, the board power of duties. And you will notice that's one of the amendments we made in the Senate is we changed the effective date. Because the Board of Medicine, because of our late date of our session, telling them to do this by July is a pretty big ask to change the licensing and change the things in the computer, et cetera. So we did extend that to January. And then we've done that on a couple of other bills that are out there just to give the Board of Medicine more time to take these things into effect. It talks about the advisory committee to the Board of Medicine, that a majority of the members of the advisory committee will be physician assistants. There's currently an advisory committee. We just adjusted that to read, instead of at least 2, we want the majority of the advisory committee to be the physician assistants. And some of this is new language here on the engrossed version, and I apologize, and I believe that you folks did that on the optometrist bill on the House side too. Some of the language requested by the Wyoming Medical Society, and that's in the identification, that you're not going to hold yourself out oneself as a doctor or something that you're not. And part of that ID process is on the engrossed version. If you look on, I apologize here.
And we did put that language in the.
You know where the page,
We're
anyway,
very
it's an
familiar with it.
identification.
Yes.
And as one of the senators said, you wear a name tag that's slightly smaller than the size of your head. Identifies who you are, what you do, et cetera. The one other thing that the bill does is it changes, rather than prescribing under the license of a physician, you're prescribing under your own license. We already prescribe narcotics. We prescribe here amoxicillin, et cetera. We have our own drug enforcement agency or DEA license that enables us to prescribe class 2, 3 on down. Nobody prescribes class 1. Class 1 are things like heroin, and they're not something that you would commonly use. But things like Lortab, Percocet are Schedule 2 drugs. And we do have a DEA license. And if you remember 2 years ago, I believe we passed legislation that required the educational component for narcotics, for opioids. And physician assistants are under that act as well. So we're required to have that education as part of our our continuing medical education. And our continuing medical education is fairly significant. We were just discussing that earlier. We're required to have 50 hours every year of continuing medical education in order to keep our license. And right now, every 10 years, we have to retake the board exam. So with that, I stand for any questions. And if there's no questions, there's others behind me or Dr. Haverly if he shows up.
Okay, and no questions yet. Dr. Haberly, if you're on, you have the floor whenever you turn your camera on. In the meantime, Representative McGuire, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had 2 questions as you were going through your thorough explanation. Thank you, Senator. So on page 5, starting at line 16, paragraph B, where it redefines, it says a physician's assistant is an individual who practices medicine, and then there's a period after that. So I'm just curious, and then as I read the rest of the paragraph, when it talks about collaboration, it says, well, and actually that would be page 6, line number 1, a physician's assistant may, and then it goes on to discuss collaboration. So I'm just curious, if this bill is passed as is, at this time, could a PA come into Wyoming, be appropriately licensed, and then hang out a shingle and work on their own?
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Potentially, yes. Excuse me. And that would be up to the Board of Medicine, of course, but potentially, yes, it could. I can't foresee anybody probably ever doing that because, as I said, it's a team process, but feasibly, they could do that. It would be very expensive in a couple of things. In the liability insurance, it would be cost prohibitive. And you'll even see physicians are very hesitant to do that at this point. because it's a huge liability. It's very expensive. The cost of setting up your own clinic, of setting up your own office are very, very expensive. But potentially, I mean, that's a potential, and I would never say never, but it's not very likely.
One more question.
Follow up? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so one more question. So in my profession, we have assistants also. And so with regard to their liability, I'm completely liable for their actions. So, whatever they do, it falls on me and falls on my malpractice insurance. I'm curious, within the new text of this bill, is there collaborative liability, or is the liability now purely on the PA? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Baldwin.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, my experience, and any others may tell you differently, but that is right now, the liability is on the physician assistant. My liability and my liability coverage fall on me. I suppose there are practices out there where the physician does have some liability, but I suspect my case is probably more normal, and the liability falls solely on me and not on those who I work with or am signed off by.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm confused now because why are we a physician assistant if we're taking out the supervision portion? So now you're no longer an assistant necessarily because you can be independent. So help me out here. I'm not understanding that part.
All right, Senator Baldwin, elucidate that. for
Mr.
us.
Chairman, and that's a name. And that's originally where they came from. Remember, they came from the corpsman, and that's what they originally were called. And that has stuck. There have been movements within the profession to change that to a different name rather than PA, but that name has stuck. And the nuances of trying to change that in all the statutes and everything just have proved to be very difficult. So we're not truly assistants. And I would give the example in some of the rural communities in Wyoming, without naming a community that's at least 100 miles from anywhere else has a PA that works there. He's very independent. Right now, he has a doctor that signs some of his charts, and it comes in occasionally to see patients there. But in general, that PA is on his own. He does his own work. So truly, PAs are trained to work independently. They're trained to make decisions independently. So that's just a name that's stuck with the profession, and it never changed. And there's a lot of disagreement, if you will, in the profession about changing that name, but it's sort of stuck, and that we are part of a team. We're truly not an assistant, but yeah, that's the reason. It's just a name that hasn't changed.
Are there other people in the audience here to testify on Senate File 33? Come on, we'll just go right to left.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jim Hutchison. I'm a
Is
PA.
that mic on? Just make sure there's a green light on it.
Green light's on.
Okay.
You able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Jim Hutchison. I'm a PA in Lander. I'm also the current president of the Wyoming Association of PAs. Thanks so much for working your way through lunch and taking time to hear this introduction and explanation of the legislation that we have in front of you. Senator Baldwin's done a very nice job of, I think, giving you some context of the history of the PA profession. I just want to add some depth to that. In Wyoming, PAs have been practicing since the 1970s. And currently, the more than 200 PAs that are practicing in the state are working in virtually every specialty, as well as primary care. And we provide a really important high-quality access point for healthcare for our residents in the state. The other historical point that I think is relevant that Senator Baldwin elucidated a little bit on is that when this legislation was originally written, most physicians were in private practice. And what that meant was that they were trying to, one, provide healthcare, but two, run a business. And it behooved them to hire PAs to help add outreach care, increase access, but ultimately bolster income for their privately owned practice. Spin forward 40 years or so, and most physicians now are employees. They're employees of larger institutions, whether that be a large hospital, a corporation like Banner Health or UC Health or something like that. And increasingly, the benefit to them hiring a PA to supervise them is somewhat limited to them individually. And so as a result, what's happening most recently in Wyoming and certainly in other healthcare markets across the country is that PAs are not getting hired. And so other sometimes called mid-level providers, sometimes called advanced practice practitioners like nurse practitioners or PAs, other of those, specifically NPs, are getting hired preferentially over PAs. And I think you've all received and probably have not had a chance to read, I know how busy you all are, but multiple letters that have been submitted to you written by a PA who is in Casper, who had multiple years of experience, who had a very difficult time getting hired when she left a job and was trying to get hired elsewhere, and was told outright that the places she was applying for work, that they specifically hire NPs because they're quote unquote easier administratively. You have a letter from a PA who practiced in my hometown in specialized care, and abruptly their supervising physician retired. And so now their entire patient population was out of service, and that PA had to move across the state to another town in order to continue working. You also have a letter from a CEO who manages multiple clinics up in the northeastern part of the state, articulating that she primarily only hires NPs because it's hard to find supervising physicians for PAs. So that's the impetus for this change in the law. We're not trying to expand our scope of care. We're not trying to make a power grab or garner a larger piece of the pie. Wyoming isn't like that. We need as many healthcare providers as we possibly can. And I think this change in this law will help and address access issues and improve hireability of PAs, whether they're currently practicing and moving their practice or whether they're newly graduating. For example, in Fremont County, in the last 6 months, we've had 5 primary care providers retire. And that's a massive patient volume for the other institutions in Fremont County to try to take on. Currently, our nursing homes can't find providers, whether they be PAs or physicians, to take new patients under their care. We need more healthcare providers in the state. And as you all probably are aware, it's hard to recruit physicians into our state. It's hard to recruit PAs, and this should not be a barrier that moves forward. If we make these changes, I think this can be helpful. The other thing that I think is important about this legislation is that it really articulates well that in reality, in practice every day, my supervision is derived at the practice level, where I work, who I work with. Those are the individuals who have a review of my performance, assess my competence. We look at patient outcomes. That's not happening at the Board of Medicine. It's not happening certainly through the legislature. And I might be reviewing my competence or my performance or my patient outcomes with any number of my colleagues, not just my physician colleagues. I may be doing that with a radiologist in Colorado who did a CAT scan on one of my patients. So my breadth of my work for patients is much farther beyond the restriction of having a supervising physician. The other piece that I think is really important to understand about this legislation is what's not going to change. What won't change is that PAs will still have oversight with the Board of Medicine. We have a very good working relationship with the board. The PA Advisory Council is a very effective tool. They help with introducing new PAs to the state. They help with reviewing any disciplinary issues. That's not going to change. PAs will still be required to maintain a national certification board certification. PAs will still be required to maintain their continuing medical education requirements. And I believe we have one of the most stringent continuing medical education requirements of any of the healthcare professions. We'll also still be required to maintain our DEA license. And as all of you know, with the opiate issues in our state and elsewhere, the DEA has had a more prominent role in a lot of what we do. And that's important. And all PAs are licensed under the DEA. I think it's also important for you all to know that we haven't just done this in some haphazard manner. We've had a 2.5-year process of considering whether this is the appropriate thing for Wyoming. We've had multiple meetings with physician groups. We've presented at conferences. We've had listening sessions with other PAs. We've worked with the Board of Medicine on language. And we're not alone in trying to make these changes. As Senator Baldwin alluded to, currently Maine, West Virginia, Minnesota, Rhode Island, North Dakota, and Utah have made these kind of modernizing approaches to the Practice Act. We think it's a good fit for Wyoming. If I may, for a moment, can I address some of the questions that emerged while the discussion was happening with Senator Baldwin?
Sure, which we can try to do in about 2 minutes.
I'll do that.
Okay.
So one of the questions was why become a PA instead of something else? There's no perfect answer for that. We all come to that profession for different choices. I personally came to that choice because I came to the decision to work in healthcare full-time later in my life. I went to PA school when I was in my early 40s, and I work really well in teams, and that's what PAs are trained to do. Other people choose to go to PA school because they can have more flexibility. We don't have to recertify our national board certification to move from primary care to surgery. So there's some there's some advantages to being a PA in that regard. The other question that emerged was why physician assistant? It's antiquated language. The American Academy of PAs is actively trying to change that language and the name for the profession. In fact, they no longer call themselves the American Academy of Physician Assistants. They've dropped that to just the American Academy of PAs while they're undergoing this nomenclature issue. I look forward to answering any other questions that come up. I have other colleagues that are also interested in presenting, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative McGuire, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is more of a small comment. Looking at the definitions of physician's assistant, 3326501, paragraph A, Romanet I, and then if you go down to paragraph C, it's describing a PA, education, everything, and then it says, the board approves to assist in the practice of medicine under the supervision of a physician or group of physicians approved by the board. I think that if there's going to be a move to make these individuals more independent, as I mentioned before to Senator Baldwin, I think that probably needs to be changed. I'd be happy to show you that later. I don't monkey with people's bills, so that's up to you to consider, but that would be something that I would recommend you look at. Thank you.
Okay. I wouldn't say, wouldn't you agree without you having it in front of you, but Senator Baldwin, if you take that back as well and discuss, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Other questions? Not seeing any at this time. Let me check with Mr. Haberly real fast. Dr. Haberly, have you come back to your computer yet? Not seeing so. Mr. Allred would like to discuss on this bill. Welcome, Carl, back to corporations. Thoughts on Senate File 33, physician assistants?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak on and against this bill. As we look at it, physician assistant is exactly that. It's a physician's assistant. My family has seen one many times, but he's under the supervision of the doctor. Now, there's no discussion about whether medicine has changed over the years. I mean, I grew up with a GP who delivered me, who used to set bones in his office, had an X-ray machine in his office. And if we were sick, my mom called, he'd stop by the house on his way home. But just because medicine has changed doesn't mean that we need to overlook some of the overriding protections that are in there. A physician has gone to medical school. I remember when my uncle went to medical school in a foreign country. He had to serve 3 years in that country before he come back to the US in order to pay for that. And then once he got back, he had to serve a residency and be qualified before he could practice here in the US. There's a lot of time that goes into this to become a doctor. And this bill here is allowing somebody who has not been to medical school per se. They went to physician assistant school. You have to get a master's in order to graduate from that. Medical school is quite more involved and takes a lot more time. And so when a physician's assistant sees a patient, there is a medical doctor who has signed that he has got responsibility for that PA. While that PA may possibly carry their own malpractice insurance, that doctor also has liability if the PA screws up. By doing this, we are basically making a PA a doctor without having gone through med school, without having done all of the requirements to become a doctor. You know, I'll tell you, in Kenmore, where the sponsor of this bill served, in a clinic up there, most of the people there in town were extremely surprised to find out he wasn't a doctor, because that's what was presented to them. Now, I believe that a doctor is a higher standard than a PA. Now, do PAs serve a very good purpose? They absolutely do. They help take a lot of that load off of doctors, you know, that can do, frees them up for some more action. In this state right here, we don't allow naturopaths who actually have been to a medical school, just a different one than the allopathic doctors go to, but they can't hang their shingle out and practice as a doctor. And they have been to medical school. Quite frankly, I believe that I would have more faith in a veterinarian who has gone to medical school than just relying solely upon a PA. And can they hang their shingle and practice independently? If this bill passes, you're absolutely right, they can. And the people out there who have entrusted themselves into a medical profession, they don't have the oversight anymore. And a PA can operate totally independently. Currently, that medical doctor has to do it, supervise that, and is responsible for actions done by the PA. I mean, my daughter is a dental assistant, and she's a very good one. And her dentist, you know, lets her do some things, but does she drill on teeth? Absolutely not. And would you want to go into the dentist office and have a dental assistant do what you're expecting a dentist to do? Essentially, this is what we're looking at in this bill. So that's my position, and I'd stand for any questions.
Appreciate it, Mr. Allred. Any questions from the committee? Not seeing at this time. Thank you for joining us, Carl.
Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Bonablast, are you just here for questions, or do you have some thoughts on this bill? We've referenced the Wyoming Board of Medicine several times. Usually.
As licensed and regulate practice by physicians and physician assistants. And under this bill, we continue to do so for PAs. The board obviously doesn't have a position on this bill. We have worked with the sponsor to kind of work a few things through. We've got one suggested amendment that we might want to have you take a look at today. It goes to just the training issues and making sure somebody's been through their certification before they can practice. But what I thought I would do is primarily be here to answer questions, and I thought I might address questions by Representative Duncan and McGuire, and then just briefly touch on the amendment, and then I'll answer any other questions and let you move on.
Sure, that'd be great.
So to Representative Duncan's question about liability, right now, technically speaking, a physician would be somewhat considered liable for the PA, but the PA is also liable for their actions. In our world anymore, if you're anywhere near the patient, you're going to be named as a defendant. That's just the nature of the beast. So, but this would then still, the PA would still have the responsibility if this goes through. To Representative McGuire, again, the question about PA and physician both being responsible. Under our current model, they both carry a license, they both have individual responsibility, but the physician also has a responsibility to properly supervise whoever he's delegated authorities and duties to. So there's a dual relationship now. This would only change it because there's not a supervising physician. Obviously, there wouldn't be a physician subject to scrutiny for their license. The question is, would this allow for independent practice? Yes, it would. Let's get it out on the table. Absolutely it would. One thing that we are suggesting is that there's a little difference in physician education and PA education and then training and licensure. They both have 4-year undergraduate degrees. Then the PA goes to about a 2.5-year program where they get their their master's equivalent, basically, of PA school. And then at that point, they're allowed to sit for their national certification, but they can't sit for it until they've actually passed their schooling. Physicians, they got the 4 years of undergrad, they got the 4 years of med school, and then they start into anywhere from 3 to 5, even more years of residency training in the specialty, whether it's family medicine, neurosurgery, whatever. Usually they're able to start taking their 3-step examination either late in medical school, or more likely it's actually they're going to start taking it in the start of residency program. Now, our residency here, for instance, is a 3-year program, but most of our residents here in the state actually manage to get all 3 parts of their examination passed by the time they're through their 2nd year of residency. So we say, okay, let's go ahead and get you licensed with a full unrestricted license because you've fulfilled all the requirements. We only require 2 years of postgraduate training. So anyway, by the time somebody comes to us and says, hey, I want to get licensed as a physician, they've already passed all 3 steps of the licensing exam. That happened, long before they finished residency. PAs, on the other hand, have to finish their postgrad or their training, their PA program before they can sit. So there's this kind of gap in there where right now the Medical Practice Act says that a PA who's finished PA school but has not yet passed their certification examination can get a temporary license, provided that within a year they pass their certification examination. Now, the problem, of course, is if we take folks to independent practice, that would mean that somebody fresh out of PA school could get that temporary license and start working and not have passed their certification or their licensure exam in the PA world. Our suggestion is that on the bill on page 8, basically insert line 8, because this is part of section 504. And I'll defer to Senator Baldwin on presenting it, but that we add a line in there that basically says that persons who have completed PA school but haven't been certified yet may be granted a temporary license. They can either be supervised by a physician, as they would be now, until they get their certification or they pass their licensure exam, or a PA with at least 5 years of licensure experience. So you've got somebody experienced who's looking over their shoulder while they're working until they pass their licensure examination. That's a real abbreviated description on it, but I think that protects those brand new graduates who are coming out. They want to go to work, they need to get experience, but they can't have their license right away. And so that's what this is. But I believe the clerk has the amendment and so on. But with
You
that,
agree the Board of Medicine is agreeable? I'm just making sure you're speaking on behalf of the Board of Medicine. You're agreeable to that amendment?
Mr. Chairman, that's our suggestion, yes, because that way we accommodate those folks who are kind of in that betwixt and between spot.
Okay, questions, Mr. Bonobos? Not seeing any, but thank you for, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your opinion, I'm finally getting my head around this whole thing. So in your opinion, would this be basically just modernizing and updating our statutes to be consistent with the actual practice of what's going on in the business? That we're just trying to update our statutes to match what's actually happening in the practice of every day of what's going on. I'm seeing head nods. Okay, thank you.
And
got
Mr.
it.
Chairman,
What do
if I
you
may,
agree?
yeah, it is reflective of, for instance, the independent practice authority that nurse practitioners have. And so it really is that same kind of training, same level of training. They still have all the responsibilities, all the requirements for licensure and requirements for, well, if they're smart, carrying malpractice insurance and that sort of thing. So,
Okay. Great. So no further questions. Thank you very much.
thank you.
We have a couple of people online. Anyone here in the room who wishes to testify? Come on down. Welcome to corporations. Make sure that green light is on the mic and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Julie Weitzel. I'm a physician assistant. I'm currently employed at the Colorado State University Health Network facility. I also have an active license in the state of Wyoming. I previously had worked with Dr. Carol Fisher in her urgent care and family practice of physicians. Because Dr. Haverly had a super short timeline, apparently he wasn't able to give his testimony, so we had to back up, and I have his letter here, so I'd like to read that if I may. To the members of the Corporations Committee, as a family physician in Wyoming, I'm writing in support of SF 0033. I'm currently in private practice in Laramie, where I supervise a physician assistant. We are considering additional physician assistants as well. The state of Wyoming has done an excellent job of recruiting and retention of physicians in the last decade. The WWAMI program has helped us improve access to primary care physicians, surgeons, and specialists across the state. Physicians alone, though, cannot completely fill the healthcare needs of our citizens, nor should they. As we seek to expand the healthcare team, physician assistants make an obvious choice to fill that void. Outdated laws, however, add meaningless cost in terms of money and time, and are a needless obstacle for employers large and small. To summarize my thoughts, physician assistants can greatly improve true access to healthcare in Wyoming. The current physician assistant supervision laws are outdated, burdensome, and costly. Physician assistants have superior training to other non-physician healthcare providers regarding the needs of our citizens. Healthcare is a team endeavor, and physician assistants have a long history and tradition of collegial, helpful, and efficient teamwork with their counterparts and physicians. Other non-physician healthcare providers alone cannot absorb the entire burden of need that exists in Wyoming. Modernization of supervision laws allows for local practice-specific improvements. Thank you for your service to our state as you consider the best ways to modernize and expand our healthcare workforce. Please contact me with any questions or concerns if you'd like me to expand on these thoughts. So those were Dr. Haberly's thoughts. I'm sorry he couldn't be here because of his short, restricted timeline. I'm open to questions, but may I add one additional response to the gentleman that was on previously, just in a little bit of a defense of our training.
If you feel the need to.
I feel the need to. As far as physician assistants, when we are looking to apply for PA school, the requirement there is that we have 200 to 1,000 hours of medical related experience or observation time. So many of the PAs are somewhat a non-traditional person who has had past medical experience and has wanted to further their education and go into more direct patient management or patient care. Our education is training in the medical model, so it's been modeled after the medical school curriculum. So we do follow that curriculum. That's why you'll see a lot of the physician assistant programs are associated with the medical school. And it mirrors those the medical school training model. Additionally, I'm sorry, go ahead. Additionally, in our clinic, in our clinical rotations, which are 13 months usually of clinical rotation after we've already done 12 months of didactic or academic theory, we have to have between 2,000 and 3,000 hours of hands-on supervised clinical rotation experience. So there's a pretty significant hands-on training there. Additionally, the master's program, part of the physician assistant training is modeled after critical thinking and critical theory so that we are taught how to analyze and research information so that when we are trying to create plans and diagnoses, we're able to do that in an analytical, critical thinking model similar to our physician counterparts. So that's what I have for that.
All right.
Of our
I think you're currently looking at a 9-0 vote, and there's probably nothing you're going to do that's going to help it. Only way is to take it the other way. So any questions?
Good to hear.
All right, not seeing any. Certainly thank you for being here and
Thank
reading
you.
the letter
Thank
on
you.
behalf of Dr. Haberly.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Anyone else wish to testify in this bill? Seeing none, I think we have one left in the waiting room, Mrs. Frary. We're going to bring you in. And as we're waiting for her to upload here. Ms. Frary, welcome to Corporations. If you turn on your camera and your microphone, the floor will be yours. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for giving me this opportunity to address you today. Senator Baldwin and Jim Hutchinson have really articulated many of the things that I was wanting to testify on, but I would like to touch on a few few points, maybe just from my own experience and some of my own observations. I have said my name is Jennifer Frary, and I've been a PA for 36 years, and I've been practicing in Wyoming since 1987. And full disclosure is that I am the vice president of the Wyoming Association of Physician Assistants. And the email that you guys received over the weekend, I drafted much of the text of that. But I'm talking today just as a licensed PA in the state. When I came to Wyoming, there were about 50 PAs, and I practiced with Lanny Reimer in Newcastle for 9 years. And now there are almost 400 of us practicing in the state. And things have changed a great deal, which, Senator Baldwin and Jim had discussed. And I think the thing that I have seen in my time in Wyoming is that, we have expanded from working mostly in primary care to all specialties. And I think if any of you have had experience with PAs, we work in surgery and primary care and in all sorts of specialties. And the thing that Jim articulated is that, a lot of PAs and a lot of physicians are hired by these medical groups. And so we just want to continue to be, part of that hiring process for those appropriate jobs. One brief thing that I'd like to touch on is some of the concerns that you guys may hear from your colleagues and constituents and from physicians or physician groups. This bill is not a ploy to take jobs or create competition with physicians. I doubt that you can find any community in Wyoming that has too many doctors. And we are not and never pretended to hold ourselves out as physicians or call ourselves doctor. We're trained to be PAs. We're proud to be called physician assistants. I identify myself every time I see patients. And honestly, if we want to be doctors, we would have gone to medical school. I work with 2 physicians and 4 PAs at the walk-in clinic at the Campbell County Hospital. But I also work with everybody on the healthcare team. I work with the ER physicians, the urologists, the surgeons. And as my colleagues have said, we can with all of our colleagues. And our goal is to continue to be part of the healthcare team, but to be a viable part of that team. And the need in Wyoming is still great. There are a shortage of providers, and it's difficult to recruit physicians, let alone trying to, keep these communities, having adequate and quality healthcare. And so I feel like that we want to be a viable option to be hired for these positions, and we want to continue to be a vital part of Wyoming's healthcare team. So thank you very much, for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Well, certainly appreciate it. Go Camels. Any questions for Ms. Frary? And I like that you have the grandkids in the photo in the back.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any questions though, Jennifer, but certainly thank you for being here today. Appreciate your testimony. And then committee, Mr. Hedges, I believe, is in the room and would like to testify on this bill. Ryan, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, my name's Ryan Hedges. I'm the CEO at the Lander Medical Clinic and Western Family Care here in Lander and Riverton. We're a multi-specialty group employing over 25 providers between PAs, nurse practitioners, and physicians. I just like to designate my support to this. As a multi-specialty practice, we find it hard to cover all of Fremont County. Our physician's assistants practice hand in hand with our nurse practitioners and our MDs and DOs also. It's a great collaborative process. However, it's extremely burdensome when we go to hire a mid-level or physician extender to look at the PAs just for that reason, that your nurse practitioners are a lot less cumbersome to have to deal with all the paperwork and everything like that. They can practice independently. I'd like to address a concern earlier that was addressed, that this will allow the PAs to go hang up their own shingle and start practicing medicine. I don't foresee this being an issue, as in this day and age, there is definitely safety in numbers, and to go out on your own and try to practice on your own with the cost of medicine, of billing, of your reimbursement rates dropping daily, of your malpractice, it would be absolutely almost impossible to go out and hang up your own shingle and try to practice medicine. as a physician assistant and make it on your own. So I feel my physicians, my partners that own Lander Medical Clinic, all are in support of physician assistants being able to help practice and become more freely to practice on their own. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Hedges? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Ryan, for being here with us today. Appreciate your
Thank you.
testimony. Anyone further to testify on Senate File 33? Representative Washut is just going to take a seat in the front row. All right, with that committee, we will close testimony on Senate File 33. What is your pleasure? Moved by Blackburn, seconded by Roscoe. And then committee, I believe there were 2 amendments passed out. If anyone wanted to move either of those at this time. Mike. So you're on the proposed amendment 1403. Do you have a copy of this, Barb? I hope so. I have a copy of it. Moved by Hunt, seconded by Blackburn. Did you say both the small one too on the page 9? Okay, so both of these, Barb, I believe you have, it's proposed amendments 2 and 3. Senator Baldwin, come on down. You are, because apparently there's an issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to interfere. Just the only amendment that is preferable, we initially did the very short one that just did a repeal. The preferable one is the other amendment that has the new language. And that's.
Okay. So Representative Hunt.
So yes, Mr. Chairman,
So
I
the
would
one
move
that's just a repeal.
1403, the
Okay.
longer language.
And still seconded by Representative Blackburn. Discussion on the amendment committee. Seeing no discussion, question being called, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That amendment is passed. Further discussion on Senate File 33, not seeing any. Representative McGuire, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, Representative Duncan, I heard that. So, and since we have the sponsors of the bill here, this, and again, I'm not one to monkey with people's bills, but this would be something for you to consider. And it seems to me that in the title, and that would be Article 5 of the Green Books, and since you're rewriting Title 5 anyway, it's not going to make any difference money-wise with regard to publishing. It seems to me that the title should be expanded to say physician's assistants and independent PA. And the reason being, I would propose to you this as a question would be, it seems to me from the testimony that there are 2 potentially independent in different ways that a PA can practice. Might be an independent out in a rural area, might be part of a large team. And for the consumer, it seems to me that there is an unintended consequence based on the historic name, that there could be confusion and it may be misleading. So I would just ask you in a question manner, if you would consider that as some kind of an amendment, since they're going to rewrite that whole section anyway. Why not change the title? Because that's really where the crux is. If I walk in and it says independent PA, I don't have the feeling that that individual is working as a team with a physician. If I see so-and-so PA, physician's assistant, then as a consumer, I would presume that that individual is working with a physician. So that would just be a recommendation in a question form. Thank you.
And Sir Senator Baldwin, even though we're not really in public comment, if you did have initial thoughts on
Yeah,
that question.
A couple of thoughts on that. If you
Go
look
ahead.
through all Section 500, it defines providers. And that's consistent through. A physician assistant is an independent provider as it describes that. Secondly, actually in Article 5, the title of Article 5 is physician's assistants. In addition, that piece of the bill that identifies where we have to wear the badge, you have to have it on the wall, et cetera. I think it's sufficient. And I think at some point in the future, if the name of the profession were to change, then certainly we could go back into the statute books and rewrite that. But I think with the identification and right now where it does say physician's assistant, Article 5 physician's assistants, I think for the consumer, I think that is clear. And I think it's certainly that's the prerogative of the committee if you wanted to change that. But I think that's something that, that is pretty well identified now. And at some point in the future, if that name changes, then we could certainly change it. That's happened in the past occasionally.
Okay. And noted, and if you do need a committee of the whole amendment or something in the House, certainly let us know. I mean, I think it is a valid concern. Nowadays, a physician assistant can go contract with any national company and run it open like an urgent care. And I know there's some places have teams, but I can imagine a scenario where you maybe have a name of some national brand and it's just you as a physician assistant kind of running a clinic, but you have the liability malpractice from a larger corp. But I think those are happening even here in Wyoming. So anything you need, let this committee know before we get the bill to the floor.
Great.
With that, further
Question on the
discussion.
bill.
Seeing none and question being called, Barb, if you'd call the roll on Senate File 33.
Representative Blackburn,
Sorry, aye. Trying to.
are you ready? Okay. Representative Blackburn? Representative Clausen? Representative Clifford? Representative Duncan? Vice Chairman Air? Representative Hunt? Representative McGuire?
Aye.
Representative Roscoe? Chairman Swanitzer?
Aye.
9-0.
And then Senator Baldwin, who do you have to manage this in the House? Okay, Representative Sweeney it is. All right, with that committee, and just remember to the public, we are going till 2:28 today because the House got out late for recess. So the next bill for our consideration will be Senate File 74. Senator Landon has been waiting patiently for almost an hour and a half now. So to the good former chairman of corporations, who moved out when I moved in, welcome back to House Corporations to present Senate File 74. The floor is
Thank you,
yours.
Mr. Chairman, and it's good to be back. A good couple of years working with several of you. Really enjoyed the experience, and I think we did some great work, and a little bit surprising, but really a good surprise that we're in front of corporations, Mr. Chairman, today. And it must be Healthcare Day in corporations. Mr. Chairman, in the interest of, we've had folks drive down here from Gillette and Casper. And in that interest, I'll try to expedite a little bit Senate File 74, but I always like to let you know how this bill came about. I was visiting with a trainer in my district who has since become a friend, and just asking about the practice, because it was about 10 years ago that I carried the bill which established the practice of athletic trainers. And I think you were around then and maybe even helped. So a decade later, we are back to revisit that practice a little bit based on the conversation that I had with my good friend. He said, you know, we are educated so much more and have so much more capability today than we had a decade ago. And so many more things going on across the country that we are allowing our athletic trainers to do, that it sure would be nice if we could ever take another look. And absolutely, that's what we do as a citizen legislature. So thus the genesis of Senate File 74. Mr. Chairman, this bill very succinctly does three different things. It changes the definitions to for athlete and for athletic injury. You'll find that on page 2. And then over on page 3, it changes the provision or allows for the board to set rules and regulations for the provision of telehealth services and for the provision of additional services in a declared state of emergency. The first of those is particularly intriguing to me because as we look at our education K through 12 out across the state and resources become tighter and tighter, I was interested in the fact that maybe Riverton could, if they had a trainer at Riverton High School, for example, maybe they could provide some telehealth services to Wind River or Du Bois or Wyoming Indian, for example. Or perhaps one of the trainers in my neck of the woods could reach out and help somebody over in Glen Rock, for example, with telehealth services. That was very intriguing to me. Those are the three things, Mr. Chairman, that the bill does. We have some experts who are here and can talk a little bit more about the background, but as you may remember, I spent a great part of my career at the college in Casper and served as an athletic director in the Dean of Students office. And so I have some boots on the ground experience in working with our trainers, as well as those that they refer to, our physical therapists. I can remember times when we had students from our theater and dance department on campus would reach out to our athletic trainer, and he could not do anything for them. I mean, legally, the scope of practice just simply doesn't allow that. I remember refereeing some ball games and going to our trainer, and he said, "You know, actually, I can't help you. If you turn an ankle, if it's a PE teacher at your local high school, technically, our athletic trainers can't help those people. If it's a member of the band, somebody gets hurt a little bit on the football field practicing for band, marching band or whatever, our trainers cannot look at them either." I think overall, this is a good move for our state. Many states allow the athletic trainers to do much more than we're allowing here in Wyoming. And so I think it can be beneficial to this practice. I think it will also be beneficial to our physical therapists who work closely with our trainers. I will tell you real quickly, and then I'm going to get out of the way. When we got to committee of the whole, we did receive a letter from our physical therapists with some pushback on this bill. We had not received anything prior to that. We really did not, I felt, have the chance to do that justice, any of the thoughts they had, and pledged to them that I would work during the next interim to take a look at their practice with them. But you may hear from them today, and that's all fair and good. Today, Senate File 74 comes to you with great support from the Senate, and I'd like to get out of the way, Mr. Chairman. There's some good folks behind me who I think would like to speak on the bill. So if there's no questions, I'll back out of the way.
Senator Landon, I know, do you going back in at 2:00?
We do.
I'd like to say, trust me, but you never know what'll happen. But if you need to head out,
thank you.
Feel free to.
Appreciate that, Mr.
Oh, Representative Blackman, you have a question?
I do have one.
Go ahead.
Senator Landon, on page 2, line 19, where it talks about employment-related physical activity, what are you envisioning there? I'm not, what is that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I actually touched on a couple of areas that we had in mind with that particular part of the bill, employment-related physical activity. Actually, in the state just to the east of us, where the big national park is with the heads, they have several industrial kinds of companies that hire athletic trainers just to keep their workers up to speed and taken care of. We don't necessarily envision all the way to that right away, but we do like the ability in those school settings, for example, for the trainers to be able to do a little bit more with our PE teachers, with our members of the band, members of the rodeo team, members of different clubs and organizations that might run into difficulties. I hope that answers your question. I think we'll have some experts behind us that can speak a little bit more to that.
I do understand the school part, all that part. Just I'm thinking the truck driver going down the road, he gets a sprained ankle. One other question.
Sure.
How do you think, or have you thought about this taken away from a physical therapist? I know you touched on that just a bit, but can you expand on that?
Go ahead, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I can, and I think that you'll probably hear testimony that is their concern, that they feel like they're worried about encroachment. I guess the way I approached this bill is I felt like as many referrals as our athletic trainers do for our physical therapists, I think this will expand the scope of practice for both of them. I think it will certainly benefit our citizens out there. With regard to what you pointed to, Representative, I use that construction industrial job situation as an example that goes on in other states, that they literally, some of these construction companies, my understanding is that they're hiring athletic trainers to take care of their workers on the workplace and keep them up to speed so that there's no downtime. And so I'm certain that some of these other folks behind me can speak to that too.
Thank you, Senator.
Before then, Representative Duncan, question for Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So could, for example, I'm trying to think of employment around our area. So for example, my husband and as a railroader on and off the train, maybe miners, things like that, would that be possibly a type of employment? Are we thinking along those lines?
Senator Landon, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I believe it would be. Keep in mind that we're going to promulgate rules and regulations regarding all of this, and there will be a lot of input by everyone on that front. And there is a scope of practice for athletic trainers. They're not going to be doing anything that they're not educated, trained to do. But certainly, if they can be made available where they haven't been before, I'm all for it.
All right. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Searles from the board, I don't know if you have thoughts or comments on this bill, or you're just here for questions, but certainly open the floor to you if you'd like to offer some comments on Senate File 74.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Afternoon.
I am here just to answer questions, but to answer some of the questions about some of the industrial fields that this might impact. The board office has taken calls from mining operations and also oil field corporations asking if they can hire athletic trainers. And under the current statute and rules, they are unable to do so. And I think that's part of what leads to this. And with that, I would stand for further question.
And just if you would identify yourself, and I know who you are, but for the record, if you talk about what you do professionally.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I'm Greg Searles, the Executive Director for the Athletic Training Board.
Committee, any questions? I won't have them go too far just in case. Thank you very much, Mr. Searles. Hang out in the room. I'll just turn your video off. Members of the public, come on down, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. My name is Clay Wilson. I am a board member of the Wyoming Athletic Trainers Association. I'm an athletic trainer here in Wyoming, in Casper. This current bill is set to expand to help with athletic trainers getting into those professions that have been mentioned. Currently, we're an athletic trainer who can take care of an athlete with an athletic injury in an athletic setting. And that particularly narrows us for our scope of practice and what we're educated in. Most people know athletic trainers from the sidelines of a high school or a college or that sort of thing. However, our education has taken us in a lot of different directions because of our background and our education and our training. A lot of places, military, industrial settings that we're talking about, performing arts that was mentioned, those settings are employing athletic training, and we're not able to in this state. As Mr. Searles referenced, we have been approached and asked whether or not we could be hired, and we've had to turn those situations down. We're a nationally recognized, certified healthcare provider. We have, most of us have national provider identifications. We are state licensed already in the state. We have a supervising physician. We have someone who signs off on our license, who we do collaborate with and take co-responsibility. One of my doctor's phrases was co-responsibility for the patients that we work with. Those doctors who do sign off on our license, we have a lot of conversations with them, but we are able to make those independent decisions if those doctors aren't physically over our shoulder at that point in time. We go back and discuss those things with our doctors. We ask for direction from our doctors a lot of We have a broad overview of a lot of different healthcare, nutrition, strength and conditioning, rehabilitation, treatment for those injuries, general practice, family type practice, that illnesses come across our education, orthopedic injuries come across our education. A lot of this has been able to translate into these other companies that have been asking. They're employed in a lot of other states. A lot of companies are employing them in other states. The reason this bill originally got brought up was because of those companies asking, and we had to turn them down. Oil, gas, construction companies. I could see railroad, something I hadn't considered. That is certainly something that could reach out. We are looking to change this into a physically active person, physically active employment setting, instead of just athlete in an athletic setting. One of the examples that Senator Landon brought up was the officials or the coaches. Currently, I don't know of an athletic trainer that would truly turn down an official who turned out his ankle during a game. However, that is something that we have to judge by at that point in time. If our physician is there with us, the physician's going to help us with it. They're going to take that on it with them. But at the same time, those are risks we don't feel we want to take. We also want to expand our scope. This language that we are looking to put in doesn't impede another healthcare profession. The concern that was questioned, does this take away from PTs? Most of the time, the athletic trainers that I know of, we're so busy with so many athletes that we're going to refer out those long-term, those ones that we can't spend the one-on-one time with that we need to. And so we want them to go to the physical therapist. We want them involved with us. It's another team situation, similar to what the PAs are kind of going through. It's very collaborative work. Strength and conditioning coaches, physical therapists, could be neurologists, the team physician, which could be general practice or orthopedic, along with the athletic trainer. And in schools and in some corporations, the nurse or that person that they have on site is a healthcare provider. And so we want to be able to expand our practice and work with those people as well, and in those settings. Those settings, we've learned that there's a lot of states that have them. They're in various situations. It could be an actual employment by those settings or by those corporations. It could be an outreach situation from a clinic. So there are several other types of situations, but this language allows us to do those.
Okay, questions for Clay? Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's always interesting when we do have scope of practice questions, and lots of professions they want to define themselves. So I'm just curious, when looking at the qualifications for an athletic trainer, what is the difference between that and the requirements for an occupational therapist? Thank you.
If you know.
Our education has taken us in different directions to some extent. We do have a little bit of overlap sometimes with certain things that occupational therapists do. Ergonomics, how a person works in their setting. We do get some of that training. As our education is expanding, we're currently at a required master's level. They are devising different routes to go for certain athletic trainers, someone who maybe targets a little more industrial or someone who targets a little more public health, those types of situations. With that being said, an occupational therapist a lot of times will be very structured in their education for some of those settings. And that's their goal, is to go down that particular route. With an athletic trainer, since I mentioned we touch on a lot of different settings, an athletic trainer who wants to work in that type of setting would focus more in those routes with the ergonomics, with how they work in their job situation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the typical athletic trainer that's here in the state, how long and what would that individual have to do to get an occupational therapist license?
They wouldn't shoot for an occupational therapist. That would not be at all what their goal would be. If a business is looking for an athletic trainer to be an outreach situation to the oil business, then they would have to follow all of the OSHA regulations and the oil business regulations, along with the clinic regulations or whatever business employs them. And they would be identified as an athletic trainer. They would not be trying to get the occupational therapist license.
Further questions? Not seeing it this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Nair, Jennifer, if you're here for Senate File 74, we'll turn over the floor to you online. Let me ask you to turn on your camera. Committee will give it about 10 seconds. Although it does not seem to be clicking in. So maybe she walked away from her computer. Other people are here to testify on Senate File 74. Doesn't matter to me. Come on down. You stood up first. All right. Welcome to House Corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jamie Childs Everett. I'm a doctorate of physical therapy with a private practice here in town. And I'm going to be reading from this because I'm really nervous. So, and I also, it is on. I just need to get closer. Okay. I also represent the American Physical Therapy Association Wyoming chapter. And I do apologize for not making it to the Senate hearing. My virtual hand was up, but couldn't get on. So this is why we're kind of late to the game today. So listening to the testimony from the athletic trainers and their arguments of wanting to treat more, I agree. I find it absolutely deplorable that they cannot treat a coach, an official, or a staff member of an athletic event, and especially if they're injured. I understand that also treating any other than a student athlete is sometimes contractually restricted by the school district itself, and it's not just the scope of practice. Reasoning behind that restriction may be built upon the liability of the school system to only cover the student athlete, as well as budget restrictions of treating non-athletes, as Mr. Wilson did manage to say that they were busy enough treating the athletes themselves. There's also the protection of the employee with the use of workman's compensation claims if they do get injured on the premises of the school itself. So those are all needing to take into context. With the educational budgets decreasing, many schools are having to rely on outside healthcare facilities or entities to cover the sporting events with athletic trainers. And this is kind of where we come in. There are several physical therapy clinics that hire athletic trainers to go to those sporting events, and they cover that service as well as that liability of the athletic trainer. Speaking of the liability, I'm gonna try to make this fast. I know it's almost there, but courts have recognized a number of areas of potential liability in the sporting context. And these have been included with a need for pre-participation physicals and screening examinations by physicians to clear for play, as well as that relationship between the physician and the athletic trainer. And if this relationship constitutes appropriate supervision. I have some research on a lot of the court cases that have been brought regarding the level of supervision. But again, this is within a school district. Because of that liability in the school district, many times how long the athletic trainer, I'm sorry, I just got a retainer and it's just like clicking all over in my mouth. So yeah, good. So that the athletic trainer can treat or what is required prior to a referral. And these are noted as standing orders, and most school districts will have these. This is provided by the school district and composed by the athletic director and annually reviewed by a physician, if not amended. Unfortunately, this proposal, as it is being brought forth, is not a bill to give the athletic trainer the ability to treat a coach, a school member, or a staff member in a sporting event. This is a bill that gives the athletic trainer the ability to treat anyone, basically anybody without direct supervision, without screens for comorbidities, and without standing orders, including the need of a referral or time constraints of that treatment. I've had the great opportunity to review various state practice acts, if not all of them, and just to see if maybe we're just blowing smoke right now or what's been going on as a trend. And what I saw is that as they broaden the definition of the athlete itself, they also included some suggested other changes to their scope of practice. Changes that mandated that the athletic trainer and the healthcare provider, many of these cases, the physical therapist who was the employer, was also brought into this change, that they meet at least annually to review the standing orders and ensure that orders reflect the current best practices in the traditional athletic setting. However, where standing orders were absent, or when the athletic trainer encountered a physically active individual who has not been pre-screened by another licensed professional practitioner that was identified in the statute, and this again included a physical therapist as their employer, the Practice Act required the athletic trainer to provide an immediate referral to a higher level healthcare provider for evaluation of that individual. For example, the Connecticut Athletic Training Association recently clarified that in employment situations outside a traditional athletic setting, that the athletic trainer will be required to immediately refer to any individual who presented with an illness or injury because those non-traditional settings would not have standing orders. This did not exclude the athletic trainer from for performing injury prevention, wellness promotion, or even providing emergent care. Other state practice acts were defined in the revision of the term athlete, as we are doing with this one, including the terms coaches and officials. Just really in short, Utah is a particularly one. The athlete means an individual, referee, coach, or athletic staff member who participates in that exercise, etc. I won't read it all. We do not question the level of training of the athletic trainer, not one bit. They are good at what they do, and especially to deliver emergent care or acute care to our athletes. We do have concerns regarding the proposed language and the lack of definitions. This leaves some of our physical therapists and their clinics not willing to employ athletic trainers at this point. The proposed language of this Practice Act, specifically to the way it is currently written, does not define direction by the physician or supervision, yet broadens the settings within the depth that should undeniably include these standing orders, supervision levels, and restrictions of treatment with or without referrals. We would like to have the following amendment considered, provided by Representative Brown, in direct consideration of the athletic trainers employed by the physical therapy clinics, and to broaden the ability of our physical therapy clinics to retain the employment of these athletic trainers. Thank you.
Thank you. Quick question as I'm reading the amendment. Are physical therapists mentioned anywhere currently in
Not
the
currently, but
Athletic
several-
Trainer Act? No, not currently.
Mr. Chairman, not currently, but several are employed by physical therapists.
Okay. Oh, can you repeat that answer for Representative McGuire?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman. It is not currently, except that the athletic trainer actually cannot perform physical therapy as per statute. But several of the athletic trainers are employed by physical therapists.
Okay, Representative Duncan, smile, take a breath.
I'm-
You just look like you're
I'm
consternated there.
I am. I'm
Mhm.
confused. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my understanding that athletic trainers currently under statute can be independent from a physical therapist. They don't have to be employed under a physical therapist. They just happen, a lot of them just happen to be with a physical therapist. Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
you are correct. And many athletic trainers work in a physical therapy clinic as aides, not assistants. Assistants is a 2-year degree. They work as aides, which means basically comparable, and I hate to say this, but comparable to anybody off the street with a high school degree in the physical therapy clinic.
Other questions? Let me throw one at you, and I guess it's opinion. So I used to run a furniture store and an auction company, lots of physical labor. You're bending, you're doing stairs, you're carrying couches and mattresses. And I just, we had 12 employees. I want someone to come in for an hour and say, here's how you stretch and the right way to, bend with your knees, not with your back, kind of all those physical range of motion. In your opinion, who should I be calling? A physical therapist, an occupational therapist, an athletic trainer, just for like a half an hour of some coaching for my business?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. We have several physical therapists currently. We have one in Torrington, Wyoming. Her name is Taryn Kilty, that actually works in industrial health, and she goes into businesses and actually trains the businesses and provides nutrition and assessment in that type of industry.
Okay, so even though when I think physical therapy, I think injury, recovery, I don't think of maybe proactive, but physical therapists do some of those proactive industrial things now. And
Correct. Mr. Chairman, I also work with sports performance in my clinic. So we also work more preventative and also, the typical rehab that you're aware of.
Okay. Any questions? Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll have another couple of minutes public comment. Come on down.
Good afternoon, gentlemen
Oh.
and ladies. Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Joanna Fletcher. I am a certified athletic trainer here in the state of Wyoming. I am also on the board of Wyoming Athletic Training Association. Sorry, a little nervous. With the revisions of the Athletic Training License Board, this will allow ATs to serve in many different positions throughout our great state, as Mr. Wilson had mentioned in his previous testimony. With our education and our background in injury prevention, on-site injury evaluation and treatment, companies such as NASA, Frito-Lay's, Everett Boeing Plant, and Amazon are already hiring athletic trainers as they see the aid of their safety and personnel to provide healthcare and initial injury treatment for their employees. Athletic training is educated in recognizing safety issues related to fitting personal protective equipment, completing ergonomic assessment with machinery and lifting techniques, as well as develop protocols with our supervising physicians and recording accurate assessments of muscular skeletal injuries that occur on the daily basis and providing treatment for minor injuries and referring for the more severe ones. With these skills, it has been proven to reduce healthcare costs to the company and to help streamline the referral process from employers' aid in the overall health of their employees. So what this is doing is helping to streamline. They're seeing minor things get taken care of right away. The more severe things are getting referred on to getting into their doctor. And so they're actually seeing their employees heal quicker and getting that streamlined, getting them taken care of a lot sooner. So I ask for your support for our clean bill. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members, for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Got off easy. All right, any further public comment? Yep. About 2 minutes.
I know, I'm like, I'll try to make this fast. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having us today. My name is Jenna Walker. I am the president of the Wyoming Athletic Trainers Association. I am also the athletic trainer at Thunder Basin High School in Gillette, Wyoming. We are simply wanting to expand the language in our Practice Act to increase our patient population. Currently, there are 28 states that have expanded their practice to allow athletic trainers to work in more of the non-traditional settings: industrial, construction, automotive, performing arts, etc. Over the last few days, I've had a couple conversations with some people. Senator Landon referenced one of those. He said the state to the east. I was actually able to have a conversation with that gentleman. He is a physical therapist in Western South Dakota that works for Fit for Work, which is based out of Texas. And in fact, the CEO and the COO are physical therapists as well.
This specific company employs over 1,000 athletic trainers across the United States and into Canada. They place them into workforce settings where individuals are physically active. They enjoy hiring athletic trainers because they see the value that we have when it comes to preventing and recognizing musculoskeletal injuries. They also appreciate that athletic trainers are trained in differential diagnosis. And his example was athletic trainers would be able to recognize the difference between heart pain versus shoulder pain and refer out when necessary, especially when it's not within our scope of practice. The other conversation I had was with Audra Kent, and this was via email. She emailed me, and Audra Kent is the Director of Practice Operations with the Cheyenne Regional Medical Group. She reached out to me in support of Senate File 74, but she does not support physical therapy oversight or any amendment that would involve that. She employs 6 athletic trainers to work in clinic and then contracts out to the local high schools here in Cheyenne. She feels that medical doctors that work for her understand the scope and capabilities of athletic trainers and support them more than any therapist she has ever worked with. Again, she fully supports the original proposed language without the wording of physical therapy oversight. I do have copies of her email if you'd like to see and have that on record. I also want to note that physical therapists and athletic trainers are both considered allied health professionals and are considered equals in their respective fields. There is a joint statement from the national organization stating it is best practice for athletic trainers and physical therapists to work together instead of against each other. It is clearly stated in Wyoming Athletic Training Practice Act right now, 33-45-107, that any athletic trainer wanting to practice in the state must be under the direction of a physician licensed by the Wyoming Board of Medicine. Another consideration is, would this be a conflict for the individuals who are dual credentialed and are both an athletic trainer and physical therapist if a physical therapy were to sign off on them? One more thought on this is we have talked to several physical therapists across the state and they are fine with the language and are not pushing to have any amendments. So in the end, by expanding the Practice Act, this will open up job opportunities within Wyoming and also provide opportunities for physically active individuals to seek healthcare sooner rather than later before the injury gets worse. I am asking for your support to be in favor of this clean bill as originally proposed. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Questions? Representative McGuire, you could do it in 20 seconds or less. I'd be appreciative.
I can. Thank you very much for your testimony. My question is, did you contact the Board of Physical Therapists and discuss this with them? And has there been a meeting of the mind, so to speak, between the two boards?
Yes, there have been. Jamie reached out to me about a month and a half ago. We had a Zoom conversation about this, and there has been emailing back and forth. Correct.
Okay. Further questions? All right. Thanks, committee. And I know we had someone late to the game, Ms. Yorgis from apparently Goshen County, but I don't think I have time to take your testimony. I'm really sorry, Emily. But I did want Representative Duncan to note you were here in the online waiting room. Committee, with that, because we have so many bills ahead of us, I need to have a vote on this today. So we're going to close public comment, moved by Representative Clausen, sorry, seconded by Representative Blackburn. We do have an amendment before us, committee. If I actually really, I find that I agreed with Jamie's testimony quite a bit. I just, if physical therapists aren't currently in the Practice Act, I just can't do that today where I put them in. But if there is some conversation and some places that, and we can have some more conversations. But if anyone wants to move the amendment, certainly happy to entertain it. I just think that's a pretty broad step that it's not quite there today. Seeing no one move the amendment, any discussion on the bill? Seeing no discussion and no one moving any amendments, you're okay, Representative Roscoe? You look like you have a question, so I just.
Well, maybe this amendment take care of later.
And we just, amendment is still in the system, so if someone wants to bring it as a committee of the whole after some discussion, certainly can. All right, with that question on the bill, Barb, if you'd call the roll.
Representative Blackburn,
No.
Representative Clausen. Representative Clifford. Representative Duncan. Vice Chair Air,
Aye.
Representative Hunt. Representative McGuire. Representative Roscoe. Chairman Swanitzer. 8-1.
And Representative Washut, I hear that you're managing this on the floor. So if there is some further discussion you want to do, certainly let me know. Otherwise, committee, we'll have a full list for Friday and Monday. You heard we got 3 more bills today. So with that, we're adjourned. 2 more bills on